doing a little video here on the distinction of essence and existence. And available on the Kindle store is my book. I have it available for free with Kindle Unlimited, and I think it's maybe a couple bucks for Kindle. It's also on Apple Books as well. So let's just dig in. I won't go through this whole chapter, but the issue of essence and existence and being is really a well-developed and ancient issue going back to Parmenides and Zeno and Heraclitus. And of course, Heraclitus would be the father of what they say modern existentialism, in the sense that all things are in flux. Progressiveness undergirds progressionism, things of that nature, that things are always changing, always in flux. Heraclitus postulated the concept of the logos in order to give all of this flux and change and becoming some unity, allowing for that unity and diversity, which is actually the principle behind this essence existence argument. And really, these things can be boiled down to the law of non-contradiction and the law of identity, and of course the law of the excluded middle. So as we deal with the one and the many are those things that are composed of parts. The one is that which is simple and is not composed. So this essence existence argument can be approached in an ontological manner, where we would approach it in an a priori method, which would be to start with the notion of simplicity, since we seem to be able to look at the nature of reality and start with the principles. So maybe inductive method a priori, in a sense, where we can start with divine simplicity and work down to composed being. But I prefer the cosmological, the way of remotion, the tracing of the existence of the cause by way of the effect. We do this with dark matter, dark energy. We measure the expanse, the increased velocity of the expanding universe, and we deduce something that we provisionally define as dark energy. Now, with dark matter, we actually see the gravitational force of the effect of this gravity on galaxies. We've kind of mapped the visible universe, if you will, and there's a scaffolding of this dark matter. And why do we know it's there? Simply because we see its effects. We cannot define its essence, but we know it's there. And in the same way, God, we cannot define his essence, we cannot see his essence directly, but we can know that he is by simply looking at composed existent being. The many, if you will, those things that are composed of parts, and the most fundamental composition, we might say an existential composition, is the distinction of what a thing is and that a thing is. Very important. These views are nuanced in a certain sense. When we say address if this is a real distinction, or if this is a distinction, what we might say in re, in res, in reason, and in re, in reality. We need to make those distinctions as well. There's a great dissertation on Suez and his view of essence and existence that was in the bibliography that I posted separately of this. But that goes through the historic views, mentioning all of the Thomists that followed Thomas Aquinas, and Giles of Rome is one of those. I can't remember the other ones. I think of Gaunt, I believe. I can't remember the first name, but anyway. So this is kind of a little pithy statement I came up with, and that is God is the sublime, simple being, the uncomposed composer, and that is the notion of the one in reason and in reality, ontologically, must ground the many. It has to be. This is a popular quote from C.S. Lewis. I felt in my bones that the universe does not explain itself. And then, of course, Van Til. He did have some good things to say. Many confusions in the doctrine of God and many apologetic weaknesses can or could be avoided if God were understood, first of all, as being itself or as the ground of being. Now, this is taken further by Van Til to presuppose God. And in a certain sense, ontologically speaking, God is the one in whom we live, move, and have our being. But epistemologically, we are still at the creaturely level. And then James Dolezal says, existential absoluteness alone can ground all existential contingency in becoming. So I'm just going to read this first section here of my book. The ancient pre-Socratic philosophers, Parmenides, 490 BC, once said, whatever is. And we can find that in R.C. Sproul's book. I have this book very appropriately footnoted in a very scholastic way. This was written really for the scholarly community, so I've only sold maybe 500, maybe 600 over the last 5 years. But anyway, not too bad, I guess. But as I write, what would first seem like an obvious proposition is one of the most basic principles of reality. This is what is known as the law of identity. B is B. The law of identity is an undeniable and self-evident truth. The law of identity asserts that each thing is, quote, what it is, unquote, and is not another thing. And so concerning this principle, Aristotle actually wrote that a thing is itself, and, quote, to ask why a thing is itself is just a meaningless inquiry, unquote. And you will find that in Metaphysics, Book 7, page 17. The meaninglessness, as I continue, the meaningless character of this inquiry is rooted in the self-evident nature of the law of identity. A statement is self-evident if the predicate is reducible to the subject, as in, I am myself. I cannot assert that I am myself without first presupposing the law of being, which is be is, but I will deal with that in just a moment. Once the terms are understood as far as self-evident statements. Now, a thing can be self-evident in itself and what we say per se notum, self-evident in itself and then self-evident to others. So we would say God is self-evident in itself, but because of sin, we have a darkened, obscure sense that something's out there. Say, as Aquinas would say, we know that, for example, someone is approaching. Say you see him from a distance coming down the road, but if you know the person that is coming. You can say, Peter is coming, or if I might say, my beautiful wife is coming, Tammy. So I can recognize her. And so those that don't know Christ are, yeah, somebody's coming. It looks like a male or female. But that is that general confused sense. And so the statement God exists is self-evident, but it's not self-evident enough to where you can presuppose now the existence of God. That's where presuppositionalism goes wrong. You cannot presuppose God because the existence of God is not self-evident. It's confused. We do have, as Calvin said, this sensus divinitatis. And even as one of the ancient philosophers says, that man is, he is a religious being. Everywhere you go, there's temples. Everywhere you go, there's worship. There's something about the constitution of man that looks to this one who is. But anyway, chase that rabbit there. The Thomist scholar Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange states that which is, or he states that which is and cannot simultaneously not be. Of course, that is the law of non-contradiction there, and the page is cited there. The added negation in the preceding proposition is the declaration of the law of non-contradiction, which is be is not non-be. Now, be is be, the law of identity, we would say that that is how God starts, or how God sees things. He sees them in their positive, their affirmative affairs. But we, because we come into this world not as a blank slate, but we come into this world, say, with Windows pre-installed on us. And so through sense perception, we bring in data and write it on our hard drive. And so we start simply with the law of non-contradiction, which is the law of negation, that we simply negate. And that is the scientific method, by the way, by negation. So we negate. And that's the law of non-contradiction. Everything is based on the law of non-contradiction, even this argument from essence and existence. It is based in logic, and it is the scientific method. I write, continue on. It is another undeniable and self-evident truth that states that something cannot be and not be at the same time and in the same way. To be or not to be may be the question as expressed by Shakespeare, but the answer will never be being is and being is not, of course, at the same time and in the same way. To be is to exist. It is to have a being, as we say. It is to be an individual, or in Aristotelian categories, a primary substance. So, quote, to be, unquote, is to have a being and to be an existent being. So, therefore, whatever is, quote unquote, is real and has real existence. And that which is has real being, and to not be is simply non-being. It is nothingness. And nothingness, says Jonathan Edwards, the great awakening scholar, Calvinistic scholar, by the way, quipped, nothingness is what sleeping rocks dream of. So now, starting with the laws of identity and the law of non-contradiction as our foundation for truth, we find that we can discover and have some knowledge of reality. And this is how we do it. The first act of the mind is apprehension. We apprehend nouns, so to speak. We can apprehend verbal nouns or even actions, but for the most part, apprehension, the very first act of the mind, we just have this conception. Now when we engage in the second act of the mind, which is judgment, now we are putting subject and predicate together, and we are predicating things, and that's how knowledge is obtained. It's a very common sense approach to the nature of reality. This is Thomistic metaphysics. So, continuing on, the laws of identity and the law of non-contradiction are foundational for the discovery of truth and the knowledge of reality. The law of identity, B, is the affirmative statement about reality, and the law of non-contradiction, B is not non-B, is the negative statement concerning reality, which is existence itself, being is. Now that something is the greatest self-evident and undeniable existential affirmation that can be made. Its denial is impossible because someone must be in order to deny anything, especially their own existence. Now, let me just say here, this is extremely important. Solipsism is just really ridiculous. Pain, sequence, that which is predictable lets us know that we are actually in a real world, even though it might be undergirded by something similar to the Matrix, if you will. But that is just our essence, and we are instantiated through the avatar into this world, which is our existence. And that is how the wave function is collapsed. Only an author, an agent, can bring that essence in contact with body and get that matter form composition. When we consider this statement, why is something rather than nothing, Leibniz put that out there, and it is a great statement. It has been inferred to through the history of philosophy, but Leibniz was the first one to really put it forth as we see it. And so because we are in this great self-evident and undeniable situation that we exist, it forces the discussion of the nature of reality into the area of being. So it's really silly to talk about before time or before the Big Bang or contemplate on nothingness. The issue is we are here, and it begs an explanation. And the explanation must be greater than that which is explained. I think we'll go ahead and stop there just to make these recordings brief.